Welcome, everyone. It is Monday. Hopefully, you have your coffee ready. And for those of you in Europe and in Oceania, hopefully, you've had a couple of beers. So, we are here today to start a webinar. It is 10 o'clock here in Pacific Northwest. And we have Ivan Ficko, who's going to be talking about Power Apps component framework and what it means to Dynamics 365. Ivan, what do you have for us?
Great to see you guys. Today I will talk about component framework and how we can achieve better UX experience in our implementations in Power Apps and Dynamics, and I hope you all like it. So, should we start? Or should we wait for? Okay, let's push the button on the PowerPoint. Come on. Okay. So, to start with a who am I request, as all developers do. So who am I? I'm a software developer based in Zagreb, Croatia. I am working in Dynamics space for 4 years now, and recently, 6 months ago, I've been awarded as a Business Applications MVP. You can find my social media down there if you want to contact me, and feel free to drop a question if you have something about PCF or anything else. So, and let's connect. So first, let's start how we did it in the past. So how we did it in the past, there was a holy trinity: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We had those three files across the system, uploaded everywhere. We didn't mind how we do it, we just did it, and after we created a HTML, we were just adding JavaScript file and more JavaScript files in it, and after a while there is a pretty big mess in our system, and we need to maintain that code and stuff around it. But how can we do that, because JavaScript is all around? So we had, I don't know, we need another tool to do the job for us in the front-end development. And that's how the component framework was born. But let's talk about history for a second. I was pretty hyped when I heard first time for the custom control framework that it was called that way in the past. In 2017, it was, I think, on Extreme or something, and we had an alpha version there. We were all hyped, but there was no actual snippets to be shared publicly with us, so we didn't know how to build those components. The year after, the custom control framework evolved a bit more, and I call that a beta version. And we have there few snippets, so we can see how the actual components can be made. But as it was still in development, nobody paid that much attention to the custom control framework. But last year, in 2019, there was a rebranding. It was called Power Apps Component Framework as today, and we had actual full documentation and support for model-driven apps. And as I know, the support for Canvas is GA now too, so we can create components for Canvas apps too at the moment. But what actually PCF component framework is? It is the framework for building the controls that have a rich UX experience, and it provides us with a powerful tool set that will make the UX even better. Because as you know, back in Dynamics days, there were like simple components out there, like text boxes, drop downs, and stuff like that. But we missed some part that we wanted to create more rich component. We used web resources for that stuff, but I don't think that's the best tool now. Back then it was, but now it isn't. It's primarily focused on the dev population, because you need to actually code them. It's not usable. It can be developed by the makers or the citizen developers, but only by developers. The only limit is our imagination, because if you want to create something, you just need to have the idea. Everything else is probably provided by the framework, and you can create that stuff as long as you have an idea. The great thing about it is that you can use modern technologies like React and Office Fabric UI that I encourage you to use. Today, I will not show you the demo examples with those technologies, because I think it's better to start with JavaScript and TypeScript to understand the basics, and then you evolve to using React and Fabric UI. There are two types of controls that you can make. So first one is a field control. Field control is bound to one field on the form, and it replaces, in most scenarios, the original mask on that control. For example, you have text box control and you want to replace it with, I don't know, like in this example, with a drop down that shows countries, and it will just type in the name of the country, but it will give you a much richer experience by showing the flag and the country name. Let's see another control. For example, this one shows the two option set control that just adds a picture on top of the value. It can be pretty neat stuff. So we are all focused more on images than on text. So we can bring the experience more better with this kind of control. Or for example, this one, we know that we don't have ability to put suffixes or prefixes on the text input fields. But this control, for example, allows us to put a suffix in this example, for example, number and the centimeters followed by. Pretty cool stuff, yeah. Okay, so the second type of control is the dataset control. That control is bound to actual dataset or view in our applications. So we have a view of, I don't know, accounts, and you want to show the position of that account on a map. So if you have an address, you can use Google Maps, Azure Maps, and put that information on the map. And as you can see, it's much better if you show that on a map instead of just showing the text of an address. Next one that we have here is SharePoint control that is put on the SharePoint list and displays the thumbnails of documents stored in SharePoint. It's pretty nice to see the actual document before you download it or open it. And the last one here is an example of a Gantt diagram that you can put on any entity that has the start and end date and some descriptions. And as you can see here, you can see the progress also. So if my task is on 100%, it will show with a green color and 100% mark. And it's pretty UX or organized control. And when you look at it, you get the data straight away from the picture you see. But how can we actually make one control? We need to meet some prerequisites. So prerequisites that we need is Node.js. That's not a familiar tool for most of the people that come from Dynamics world, because we are more focused on backend stuff for a long time, and we didn't use the modern technologies on our front end. So the first step is definitely Node, and we need to use long-term support because it's recommended by the product group. And the second thing you need to have is .NET Framework version 4.6.2 And I don't think that's a big issue for most of you, because all the plugin development is nowadays working on that version, because the latest NIGGER package requires it as the first prerequisite. The third one is the dev environment. You can build your controls in Visual Studio 2017 Plus or in Visual Studio Code, but my recommendation is to use Visual Studio Code. Why? Because I don't need to move outside of Visual Studio Code while I'm developing my control. I can have a code opened, the code editor, and the terminal just below that to run all the npm commands that I need. And also, the last one is ideas. Why is that? Because if you don't have idea, sadly, you will not build anything at all. When you want to start, you need to download Power Apps CLI. That's the tool that is one-stop developer command line interface that allows you everything about the PCF framework. You can initialize the repository, run the debugging session, you can deploy your controls straight from the CLI. You can pack your solution as managed or unmanaged for the distribution and all the things around it. And I think that's the first step to ALM, not only for the PCF, but for the whole Power Apps and Power Platform. And lately, there is a support for initializing the plugins project for uploading plugins to the actual environment. So I think you should definitely keep your eye on this tool, especially for the PCF, but for the Power Apps in general. And you have, as you can see in this picture, a few simple commands that you can run and initialize your repository. So you do pf pack PCF init, and it will initialize the project structure for you. And when you do it, you will get the following. So the basic project structure is you have a root control folder that will contain two main parts, and that's the control manifest file, index.ts that holds all business logic, and additionally you can have as many folders as you like for the additional resources like style sheets. So the first one is manifest file. That's the file that describes your control from UI perspective to configuration to what your PCF control will use in terms of various resources like code scripts, CSS files, RSX for translations, images, and etc. First node is control. That's the name of your control and how it will be displayed to the user when they install it. And the second part is property part that will contain as much properties as you want, because with these properties you can configure your tool to work just the way you want. So you can bind it to, like in this example, single line of text, but you can have multiple properties that don't need to be bound to any field. It can be just, I don't know, a text field that will hold the like banned words that you will use in your component later. And other than manifest, there is an index.ts file. That file is, as the name says, TypeScript. I didn't mention it before, but the PCF controls are built on TypeScript. So if you're not familiar with TypeScript, it's a superset of JavaScript. And if you did a .NET development, you'll be pretty familiar with the syntax. It's pretty, I can say pretty much the same. It's not the same, but you will get along with really fast. When you build a project, you will have 4 methods. So init, update view, get outputs, and destroy. Init, as its name says, it is used for initializing your component. All the initialization code will go in this method, and it's called once on load. The second one is update view, that is called every time when canvas changes. For example, if you resize the screen, that method will be called. If some business rules or JavaScript trigger that some field is required, read-only, or stuff like that, this method will be called. So you handle all the changes in this method. Get outputs method is the method that will send the values from your UI, the UI that is used by your component, to the actual form. So if you send a value from this method to your form, you will get an unsaved changes on your form, and that way you know that you sent something back to your form. The destroy method is the last one, but not the least, because I don't see that people are using that method that much, and I think that it's important. The method is called when we don't need the component anymore. So when we change the form, for example, and there you need to clean up your code. So for example, clean all the event handlers that you used in your component, just to be sure that they're not triggered anymore. And when we have our components, we can put it on our organization and configure it. How to configure a component? But it's so easy. You open your form designer. At a moment, your custom controls can only be modified in the old web interface. So you open the old web interface, open the field properties, select add control, and at the right, you can see the list of all controls. Select one control, click add, and then you will have the view that is shown on the left. The most important part here is you can see the radio buttons. You need to ensure that you've selected control for all the interfaces that you want to display it to here, because that's where the most people fail. They don't click on the radio buttons and they say, I don't see the control. That's the most important part. And then you can configure your properties. On the bottom of the screen, there is always one bound property on the field, and you can add as many other properties as you want, but you configure all of that here. And when you're ready, you just hit OK, and you're ready to go. Your control will be shown in the form. Community is always a big part around Microsoft technologies, and in PCF, I think it's a really special one because most of the controls are shared for public from members from the community, and it's really good stuff. There is a pretty big thing made by Guido. It's called PCF Gallery. There is a collection of PCF controls made by the community. Most of the controls are open source, and you can find them on the PCF galleries because Guido is doing great stuff to collect all those controls. There are like almost 200 controls at a moment and like 100 authors. So it's a pretty big part in the community. PCF was like a big boom in community. There's also an ideas section. If you're not a developer, you can go there, post your great idea, and you hope that someone from the community will take care of it, and you will have your control as soon as possible. And now that's all for my overview, and we should jump straight to the demo part and let demo gods be with us, because we'll try to do a whole component from zero and try to deploy it to our environment at the end of the demo. What will we make? We'll make a pretty simple control that will have an input field that will hold the GitHub repository username, and below that there will be an image tag that will hold the image of the avatar showed on GitHub. I think it's a pretty basic control that will show you all the basic stuff you need to know about the components and how to make them. So let's jump into the demo part. Okay, just to close that real quick. First of all, we need to make directory for our control. Okay, cd git control. Okay, and we need to run the first command provided by the CLI tool. So it's pack pcf init. This method needs few parameters to initialize the repository. So the first one, as you can see, is the namespace. Most of my components is big. So the name, let's say it's git control, and the template that can be field or data set. I think that data set controls are more complex, so we'll make a field component in this example. Okay. So now we have a field component initialized, and as you can see, we need to run npm install to get all the dependencies. So npm, if you're familiar with npm, you just run npm I, and it will start downloading the dependencies. While it's downloading the dependencies, let's try to open one more command line just to show you. So cd git control, typo git control. Okay, and open Visual. You can open Visual Studio Code in that directory just by typing code dot. Okay, when we run that, we will open the Visual Studio Code with our new initialized project, and it's running so slow now. I don't know why that's so, but okay, now we see the basic structure of our component. There is a root folder that contains manifest file and the index.ts file. The first stop here is control manifest file. So we have a control tag here that will hold all the information about our control. Let's just put a space here just to make it more readable, and you can add a description and everything else up there, but let's just jump to the property part. So the property part is the part where you define all the configuration for your component. In our example, there is a single line of text property here, so it will be bound, as you can see on the right, to the one of the single line text fields on the form that we want to put in to. Let's change the name to git username that we will use. It's a typo again, username. Okay, and that's the first one, and it will just send the data back to our control. Okay, just let us open terminal real quick. Let me just check if the npm is ended. No, it's still running, but it will be finished soon. Okay, now we can switch to index.ts. As you can see, we have some errors. That's because the npm is still working on. But you can see the basic structure here. So init, update view, get outputs, and destroy. The first thing we want to use is init method. it contains few parameters that will be used in our demo. So the first one is context. The context holds the data about your control. So you need to retrieve the data from the field that you defined in your manifest. You do it via context object, and all this stuff around it, I will show you later how to use it. Notify output change, that's the method that you need to call to go to the get outputs method. Every time you bring that notify output change method, you will go to get outputs method and do your logic there. State is the object that holds the data about the state. So if you want to stay a persistible state across the forms, you need to add the stuff in that state, but we'll not use that in this example. And the container is HTML div element that holds everything in your control. If you want to add something to your control, you add a child to that div element. As I said before, we need to create few HTML elements. So one is the input, and the second one is the image one that will hold the image. So let text box equals document dot create element. Create element input. Text box one, and let image equals document dot create element. We have our elements now, but those elements are here and they're not added to the actual container. So we need to add those elements to the container to be visible in our control. So container add child text box. Okay, and let's paste that once more and add an image 1, 2. Now we have both elements on our canvas. And how to check that? First, we need to run npm script npm build just to check that our syntax is just right and that our component is working fine, and it will initiate the build for our component. It can take a few seconds or something, but if we don't have any errors, we can say that our component is ready for testing. And how can we test our component? We can test it by running npm start watch. What this command does, it opens the lovely testing harness that is included in the framework that allows us to test the framework inside that harness before uploading or deploying our component to the actual environment. We can do pretty neat testing here, especially I think, okay, I actually have one running. Okay, so here we have our inputs control that is just shown there, and one image that is showing just on the left because it's not holding any data. We can't see the difference, but it's not doing anything special at the moment. We need to add some logic here, and what we need to do is we can try to get the initial state of our component by expanding the context element. So the context, there are few API calls that you can call here, and the most important one in this phase is parameters. So in parameters, we have our Git username that is defined in our manifest file up there. Okay, so we have that single line of text exposed here, and when we get username with bro, we get the actual value of that property bind to our form. Okay, so let username equals context.raw, but raw is not always full, so it's maybe an empty string, and we need to ensure that we handle that kind of errors. Sorry, we'll put that just here and let it text box dot value equals username. So this allows us to preload our text field with the value that is used on the form before. So we have a populated value. We want to show that value to the user. It's right here. We save that. Changes are detected, and we can jump to the harness. So if we jump to the harness, for example, let's input Ficko, and it persists that state. So if I refresh it, our component will be preloaded with the text on the actual property. Okay. And what now? We go back to our code, and I will now speed up the process and walk you through. Okay, let's what we'll do now. Okay, we need to add some event handlers to our text box to download the avatar from GitHub and show it in our image tag. Okay, so I have a method here. So that's a pretty basic method that will call the GitHub API with username that is passed in, and put the source of the image container to the response that has avatar URL. That's actual URL of the avatar picture. Okay, so now we need to add event handler for our text box control. Okay. Okay, now what do we have here? I have code that is not working at the moment, but as you can see, there are some variables that we don't still have. The part with this is that you need to initialize some private variables that will be accessible on the class level, so you can use it all across your application, or sorry, control. Okay, I pasted some here. So we have a notify output changed that is also here. So in the initialization, we need to initialize our private variable with this one, so we can use that in all the other methods, not just in init one. And let's do this. Also initialize our text box on change event, just because we need to persist our this, so our class, so we can access the variables in the on change event. And on change event is down there. So what is this value? This value is actually a variable that will hold the current value of our text box input field. So when the text box input is changed, we store the variable here, so we can at the end set it and use it in the get outputs. This is why the on change, we will save that value here, pass the image in our method, and the value that is put in the text box, and run the notify output change to go here. But first we need to add some line of codes up there, just to ensure that we have initialized those private variables. So this dot text box equals text box, and same for the image. So this dot image equals image. Now we have our private variables exposed to the other methods. Okay, and now we'll add event listener to our text box. So we'll add a listener that is listening on input. That's basically when the user hits a key, it will record that and call the text box on change method. Okay, and now we have a pretty basic scenario that will do something, but let's add here. So here we call the notify output change that will bring us back to get outputs method. The return statement here has all the properties defined in our control, so bound properties. So if we have the property here, GitHub username, so we change the value in our text box, we need to send that value back to the UI. And how we do it? Just by using our private variable called value. We stored that value in our text box on change, so we can use it here. And now we have a pretty basic scenario, and we can test it out. Just hit save and open our harness again. So now okay, our API is working. Let's say my handle on GitHub is dynamics ninja. Oh, did I make a typo? Yeah. Okay, here is the image from my GitHub. You can, I don't know, type something else. So I hope most of you know Jonas Rapp, so I know his handle, so I try to display here. And we can see that our control is working. As you can see, when I type here, also the value here on the right is changed. So that value here is sent back to the UI. That's the whole point of the get output. Sorry, so the get outputs method and returning that value here. And that will cause the unsaved changes on the form. And now we need to spice things a bit. Let's add a new property here. Let's say that we want to add some styling, and we need to make our shape of the image circle or square, depending on the situation. Sometimes I want a square, sometimes I want a circle. And how can I do that? I pasted another property that is called image shape, and it's a type of element. Okay, and its usage is input. It's not bound to any controls on the form. It's just an input field that we will define on the configuration page of our control. And it's a required field, and it holds two values, square and circle. And depending on the value here, we will change the shape of our image tag. Okay, but when you add something new to the manifest, you need to run npm run build again, just to get the latest typing generated by the framework. So you got all the IntelliSense in your index.ts. When the build is running, we can jump here and let's paste the code that will get us the value from there. Okay, so here let's take shape. Let's call the variable there and read something from the image shape property. As you can see, it returns only square and circle values, raw. Okay, you see. And now we need to style our image tag, but we need some CSS to achieve that, of course. And how do we do that? We go back to the manifest and check the resources part of this. And you can see there is a line that states CSS. let's copy that one. And I just uncommented, but let's do it this way. And you can see we need to create in the root CSS folder and create a new file named .css. That way we forced our PCF to load the CSS style sheet from the CSS folder called git control, and that way we can use it in our control. If we didn't do that, our CSS will not be packed, will not be included in our control, and we couldn't get styling that way. So we need to include it first here and then add some code. I have some code here just to make our control a little bit prettier. Okay, so I pasted some CSS, but you can see I have some prefixes here. And why is that so? Because our control can interfere with the other UI parts in our applications, so we need to prefix our CSS with the namespace and the control name. Actually, that was from my test one. You can find the name in constructor here, so copy this one, just replace everything with it. So we have a little bit of styling that shows border and stuff. Power-ups purple. Of course, we have this line that will make us to use all the available space for our input control, and border radius for the circle class if we selected circle. And we didn't select circle anyhow, but let's jump to the harness. Okay. I forgot to run, of course, the npm start watch. Okay, that way we'll get our testing harness again, so we can test our control. It will be finished in no time, as I think, and we'll see the newly created property that is anim, so it will show as a drop down, and we can select the value square or a circle shape. Okay, now we see there is wall here, but sorry, here. Okay, we see that picture is showing again, and we have here the enum square circle, but when we click on it, it will not do anything because we didn't process that. But it's always needed to know that you need to initialize those values at start, at initial start of your component, because the value that is sent here is always the same for the one load. So on one load, you can have just one value here. How can we do that? Just get back to our code. So we have the shape that will hold circle or square, and depending on that, we need to add a class to our shape. Okay, so depending on the shape, if our shape equals circle, then we will add the circle class that is defined in the CSS that will just round up the border of our image, and it's the only thing it does, really. You need to do that in order to get the right shape. And let's jump to the harness again. Okay, we have a square. As I said before, this state is preserved in a session, so if I change this to circle, refresh the harness, I will get the round shape here. But as you can see on load, we have Dynamics Ninja here, but there's no image. Why is that so? Because we need to call our method for setting the image, the actual image here. And we do it, of course, with an image. There we have an image, we have a username. If we save that, open the harness again, reload it, boom, we have our image here. And I think it's a really good start, that it shows you how you can add simple component logic here. And now I wanted to share with you simple best practices and what can you do here to make your control work better. The first thing is update view method. So if you want your control to scale properly on various display screens, you need to add that logic to update view. Or for example, if you have fields that are sometimes locked, maybe by the business logic, or that they implement field level security, that's also handled here. Our thing is we can add here a pretty simple code that will make our component read-only. So we have text box disabled property set to context.mode. .mode has several options, and you can handle is it your control visible or not, or is it disabled. In this case, if it's disabled, your text box control loaded will also be disabled, and it's changed in real time. If some business rule changes the visibility or disabled state of your field, it will be shown straight away. So you handle those things here. And as I told before, there is a destroy method, and you need to clean up all the code here that you want to clear and that you don't want to be triggered anymore when you leave the page. And you can do that just by simple command. So we have a text box that is exposed right here. We just run remove event listener input on text box change, and now we are safe. We did a cleanup after the destroy method, and that's the way you do it. And you should always clear all the event handlers at the end of your control. Okay, now we have quite a control that is working, and now we need to deploy it. We ended with our testing, so we are all good with our control. What we do next? We first stop our watch function, and we, let's say, go PAC auth, because we want to deploy. What this does, it shows us the all authenticated profiles that we have here. So we need to authenticate our app, our Visual Studio Code, to deploy for us the control on the environment. And how we do that? Auth create, and in auth create we need to provide basic URL of our environment. So let's see, I have my environment here. Okay, so the URL of my environment is that one. We just copy, sorry, one more space here, and the pop-up for authentication will pop up. We need to log in. I think I have preloaded my account. Yeah, I just need to input my password. Okay, log in, and after successful authentication, we have a valid connection that we can use for push our control to the environment. Pushing the component is done by pack PCF push command. Easy as that. You need to provide, of course, a few parameters. There must be a valid publisher prefix on the environment, and as I use most of the time Fick, I will push it with a Fick prefix on my environment. When we run that command, our component is pushed to the environment. What it does in the background, it creates a temporary solution, unmanaged one, that will pack everything we have of our control, put it in that solution, publish it on the environment, and after that we have our component live on the environment and we can use it on the form. It can take some time for the first push because it pushes everything. On every time you try to push it again, it will just search for the differences and push only the differences that were made to your control. For example, if you made a difference only in the CSS, only the CSS file will be pushed to your environment. If you made a difference on the index.ts, only the JavaScript out there will be pushed, and stuff like that. But now we should wait for our solution to import. The first step is the longest one, but after a few seconds, we'll have successfully published solution on our environment, and we will check how it looks like on the environment. So one more step, and it should be online. Today it's going pretty slow, but it's usually a little bit faster. Okay, so now we have our solution published. How can we check it? We go to our make.powerapps, to solutions. As you can see, there is a new created temporary solution that has your prefix, and when you open it, you will see that there is our control uploaded there. Okay, now when we have that control, it's time to configure it. Okay, we go to our solution that I prepared before, that is basic one that has only contact entity, and in that contact entity I created a field that will hold the GitHub username. I added that field to the form, but the field is out of the box one. We need to apply our control to that field. Okay, first of all, we need to use web interface to achieve that. It's possible in the maker experience, but with some hacks, as I could say, with some plugin registrations. But for now, we need to go to the web interface and do our customizations there. Okay, we can go open the form and pick the most basic form that is the contact one. Oh, he's thinking a lot today. I hope we'll have the form shown soon. Okay, so let's open the contact form. And first thing, we need to locate the field that we want to use control in. Here's the one. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so GitHub username. It's a simple single line of text. You can bind your control only to the type that you defined in your manifest file. So in our example, our text, our field that is bounded is single line of text. So we need to make sure that we have a single line of text field on our form to include the control. Okay, go to the controls tab, add control, and search for our git control. Okay, here we go. Click add. Now we have our control. First thing I do every time is click all the radio buttons to my control to be shown on the all interfaces. But of course you can do some combinations, so show it on web and tablet and not on phone, but for now use it everywhere. Okay, it's fine to GitHub username, it's single line of text field. You can change that display property keys also in the manifest file, but for the sake of time we didn't do that. But you can change the display name here, display description here, and it will be shown in the interface. Okay, so now we have our second one, that is property that will be used to show square or circle shape. Okay, we want circle, and at the end I don't want to use out of the box control. Let's hide the out of the box control and use only our custom one. Click OK, save, publish as always, and when the form is published, we can go to check our form in our application. Okay, I have my application here, so it's the same application with that solution. We go to create a new contact, and okay, maybe I just need to refresh the hard reload to keep up with the changes. And when we see the ugly text box and the shape here, we're ready to do that. Okay, so my name, just to be sure, and here we go. Name. Okay, here we go. We have unsafe changes, save. To know that our values are stored, we can refresh the page and see if the value persisted. And as we can see, the value is persisting, but okay, it's loading and everything is working fine. And I hope that now we have an overview how to make your control and deploy it on your environment. Of course, there are more advanced methods that allow you to define the solution structure, should it be managed, unmanaged, to pack multiple controls in the solution via CLI, but that's more advanced stuff that you can learn from the docs page. I hope that with this method you can create everything you want, and even there you can just go to other solution, add existing custom control, pack it to your solution, export it as managed, and you're good to go. You have your control in the managed solution as it should be at the end. Okay, now let's wrap it up with one last slide. So final thoughts. What do we want to achieve with these controls? I want to make all the controls in PCF framework for the future, because it allows me much more flexibility, and it has defined interface, and that's important because Microsoft provided us interface that we need to use in order that our controls will not break with any updates that will become available in future. So as long as you do it by the interface, you're good. The second big thing is that custom controls are reusable, maintainable, and easily upgradable. That was not the case with our web resources. Our web resources were made just for the one purpose. We were using them on one project. 90% of the time, we didn't use those web resources on any other projects. Of course, there were exceptions, but most of the time, single use only. And that's why there is a PCF component framework that forces us to make reusable and more maintainable components. Our JavaScript was all around the place. We should replace our event handlers with custom controls. For example, if we have complex JavaScript logic that is doing some validations in the field, make that a PCF control and do logic there. And if you are not a developer, if you're a maker, there is also an alternative, and that's embedded canvas apps. Embedded canvas app is also PCF control that allows us to embed a canvas app inside a form. But I don't encourage to use embedded canvas apps in complex scenarios. Use it for the simple ones or the quick win situations but for the more complex logic, definitely use PCF controls that can be used in model apps or canvas apps. At the moment, I think that the brightest example is canvas app component. Canvas app component can contain multiple PCF components inside it. So from small building blocks, you build a bigger building block called canvas app component and pack it as one big solution that can be used all around your instances. For example, that's a big example for the canvas apps, but for model-driven apps, you can have pretty big implementations that have a single big PCF control that will hold all your logic and the complex scenarios inside it. Yep, and I think that that's all for me. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned something new. And since we are running out of time, I'm open for some questions if you want to ask me. And thank you for attention. Here we go. Do we have some questions?
Well, I think we're close to the time limit here, so I don't know if we'll have time to gather any questions.
Okay.
But if you do have after the fact, we certainly shared different ways for them to get a hold of you. And we certainly encourage everyone to go to the community forums, community.powerapps.com, and certainly post in the PCF section on any questions that you might have.
Okay, sounds fine to me. Anybody can reach me out for some questions personally on my social media, but of course, if there are questions, you can post it in our forums too.
All right, with that said, since we are at a 1 hour time limit, we will go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you, Ivan, for coming on. I know it's late in Croatia, so certainly appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, really. Thank you.
Okay, for everyone, we will be back on next week at the same time at 10 o'clock. And if you certainly enjoyed this, let us know.
Thank you. Bye-bye.